you choose how many rounds you want to play, how long each round is going to be. Um, Sorry, one second. I have a tickle. Do I have water up here? I felt that coming. I'm like, no, that water was from like 5 days ago. I hope it's okay. I'm good. I'm good now.
Everybody, welcome to episode 7 of Brews and Q's. Today, hosting myself, BMAC, along with Pete, and today we are hosting Josh from Still Loading Podcast. Josh, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man. So, go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Josh. That's all you need to know. I am the host of the Still Loading Podcast. It's a video game podcast that focuses on video games, video game history, video game culture, and all that, and everything that kind of surrounds video games and whatnot. I've been at it for 8 years, and I guess the best way to describe the show is that it's kind of like a grab bag of various gaming topics. I do retrospectives on games. I do rewatch series. At the time of this recording, the most recent episode was a episode on Captain N the Game Master. My friend Dexter and we've been doing a rewatch of that old cartoon because no one else will, and we're gonna slowly torture ourselves episode by episode. We do that only once a month though. But so I'll do I will do episodes like that. I'll also do I did an episode a couple months ago where I got a bunch of people in. I did the Final Fantasy draft, which is what happens when you take fantasy sports and Final Fantasy and mix them together. That's the Final Fantasy draft. It's the best way I can describe it without boring everyone to tears about all the logistics of it. But and yeah, so I do kind of stuff like that. Retrospectives, deep dives on individual games. I'll do talk about video game history a lot and video game preservation. And that's me cutting myself off before I go into any more detail. But that's pretty much my show in a nutshell.
So, what was your favorite? Let's go to history. So, what was your favorite episode you've done so far, history wise, off the top of your head?
On video game history, or just on the history of my podcast?
Since you started history, like video gaming history, what was your favorite episode that you've done it on so far?
Probably so a lot of the episodes aren't dedicated specifically to game history. When I do retrospectives on individual games, I kind of do deep dives into the games themselves, and I talk about their development and the developers and like some of the fun facts that you may or may not know about it. I would say in terms of an episode specifically geared towards video game history, I actually did an episode with my friend Dexter Morrill, who I mentioned before, on video game history and preservation back in I want to say in 2020, like the fall or winter of 2020. And we just kind of talked about what is video game preservation? Like, what does that mean? And the whole idea of it being like, if you want me to go into it, I can, because I could go on like a long-winded not rant, but spiel about what it is. Yeah, all right, so let's do this.
Give us a pretty cliff notes, but go into some detail. Yeah.
So a lot of these notes I'm getting from, I'm not going to take credit for. I follow a foundation called the Video Game History Foundation. They're a 401(c)(3), whatever the numbers are. They're a nonprofit organization whose mission is to, archive and preserve video game history. So they break down video game history into 3 different facets: physical preservation, digital preservation, and cultural or contextual preservation. Physical preservation is what you see behind me on the video here. It's the physical games. Like when you buy a game, actually this is perfect. Animal Crossing right here. This ties into an episode I did. I'll talk about it at the end of this little bit. But the physical preservation is just this. You have the physical thing in front of you, and whether it is the game itself, whether it's the ephemera behind it, like the physical object itself, maybe like the original pieces of art of a cover, maybe you have like something like that. That is physical preservation. It's making sure these stay in as pristine possible condition as possible. Digital preservation is pretty much exactly what it sounds. It's digitally preserving everything, whether it's scans of magazines or ROMs of games or just just a digital version of whatever games are out. That is digital preservation, and most digital preservation is generally what a lot of people do because it is it's it's the easiest, and it's also the easiest to preserve for long periods of time. Doesn't matter how long you hold these games, like NES carts, Super Nintendo carts, disc-based games, they're all gonna like lose all their data, like just naturally. You could preserve them in perfect, pristine, like have a low humidity room that's air conditioned and all that shit. Which my room is not low humidity, so but that's humidity doesn't have a huge effect on it unless it's extreme. But um, yeah, your discs will eventually just lose all their data
Wait, that's an
due to the
actual thing. I'm just learning this now at the age of
It's called data
33.
rot. It's called data rot. It is a thing.
So you're
The
telling me my Game Gear games might not even work anymore?
Game Gear cartridges will last longer than discs. Your Game Gear
Sonic?
games will, yeah, that will eventually not work. But generally, cartridge games last a long time. Like you're looking at probably like those things. You never know. They could last for like hundreds of years. They could last for like some DS games already aren't working anymore because the data's just
Okay, so then I'm going to Wawa tomorrow. I'm getting batteries and I'm loading up my Game Gear because you have me all worried now saying that.
it most likely they work. Like the fact that Atari cartridges still work, you're pretty much
Good on a
set.
Game Gear.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every game is going to work, but I'm also not saying every game is going to break. You know what I mean? But it's going to happen at some point, no matter what. So eventually, that's another reason why the collector's bubble, I was mentioning this off mic, is a frustrating as hell because all of this stuff is eventually just going to be expensive paperweights and not even good paperweights because they're light.
Just for
But
show.
it'll just be for show. It'll just be
Yeah.
conversation pieces. But anyway, so physical preservation, digital preservation, and the final one is contextual or cultural preservation. And that's a little bit harder to define because it's all around the context of a game of when it came out. So the best way I can describe it, beside like contextual preservation is like what's the story of the development of the game? What did the developers have to go through in order to get the game out? What was the cultural ramifications of that game? So I showed Animal Crossing before. Animal Crossing New Horizons is arguably one of the most important games of the last 4 or 5 years, only because it came out right at the start of the pandemic. And throughout all of 2020 and a chunk of 2021, this game helped people stay in contact with each other. People celebrated birthdays in this game. They visited each other's islands so they could so they could spend time with each other when they couldn't physically be with each other. If you just boot up this disc, or not disc, I'm sorry, this cartridge, you wouldn't get any of that. You wouldn't know the experiences that people had. That's contextual preservation, trying to preserve the experiences of the public and what it meant to the public at large. So I actually did an episode on this called Tales from the Island, where I had 3 or 4 guests on, and like not all at the same time, but one after the other, and I just talked about like what this game meant to them and what they did, like things they did in this game that helped them stay sane during the 2020 pandemic. And that's a form of contextual preservation. I'm not saying it's the most important thing, but you get the idea. Now,
Yeah.
you extrapolate this, and like what how do you preserve World of Warcraft? It changes every like 2 to 3 months. Like, they constantly add updates. So unless they have backups files of all the different updates, and even then there's thousands and millions of interactions happening every single minute in that game. You can't preserve that. That's more of a contextual preservation than a physical or digital, but that's pretty much the mission of the Video Game History Foundation and other preservationists that like it.
I love that.
Physical, digital, and contextual preservation. So my episode that I was referencing on video game history was just that. It was breaking down kind of what I did here, but in a lot more detail, and it kind of spread out over the course of like an hour and a half, and just talking about all the different facets of preservation. And even that, like, I'm not even saying I'm an expert in it. It's just I'm someone who's interested in it and has done research on it, but I can't say that I'm like necessarily an expert on it. Like, I preserve a little bit of the contextual preservation, the cultural preservation with the podcast. Technically, everyone who does a video game podcast is contributing to that, because whether it's just reacting to the news, even though those types of podcasts bore me to tears because there's millions of them. Um, or if it's like, but even so, even with that, like they're still adding to the conversation. Like they're creating some idea of like what was the context, what was the public's reaction, and what did it mean to the public when this came out, that kind of thing. So that is a fairly long-winded way of explaining video game history and video game preservation. And I'll give the second half of my answer will be much more brief. What's my favorite episode in the history of the show? So far, it's actually my Final Fantasy draft. I got a lot of people on that episode who are big podcasters and YouTubers who mean a lot to me, and I was able to gather them all for this Final Fantasy draft where they were drafting their optimal Final Fantasy roster and game. And it took months. Like I started planning it over a year ago, and then I didn't get serious about it until like January of this year, and got it done in March. Came out in April, and it's been by far my most like well received episode ever. And I'm very proud I was able to pull it off because it took a year to do.
Yeah, that's
So
a long amount of time to dedicate to it.
you had me worried because like when you said game right, I never thought to think about that. So I looked it up just now, and it's like I remember these games because I used to play these. Like you said, you might love Pokemon Gold and Silver, but the internal battery on those carts only lasts about 15 years maximum. You might boot it up to find that the in-game clock no longer works, or that your save data is gone. Like I never thought that'd
That's
be a
not
thing.
even that. That's not even that bad of a loss, though. If you think like if that battery dies, the only reason you want to open up those cartridges to make sure those batteries are good, not because
It's
they're
this
dead.
one.
If they're dead, you just lose your save data. That's the worst that's going to happen. Yeah, just like that. That's
Puzzle
exactly it.
challenge, so battery right there, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. You can replace those batteries super easily. Like it doesn't really take much. Like you can hire someone, or you could probably figure it out yourself. Like they're not hard to replace. I've never
I
done
never
it
thought
personally,
about it.
but the main reason you want to replace them isn't because you don't want to lose, like, because as soon as you take that battery out, any save data you have on there is gone. It's just wiped out. But the game itself is fine. It's just you lose your save data.
It's the
But
leaking
reason
of the
you wanna-
battery, right?
the leaking, exactly.
Yeah.
You don't want the battery to leak. But there's lots of stores. After we are done recording, I can tell you about some local ones that do repairs on local games on your game consoles, your game consoles, your games, and whatnot. So there's a couple places that'll do that.
I'm down for that. Please let me know. Thank you. I honestly never thought that I heard of that was a thing until you came here on
This
the podcast.
data rot's even more scary. Data rot, like, because your discs will go down, like, especially like the first CDs now, they've been kind of
PlayStation
slow.
1?
Like earlier than PlayStation 1, because they're
Sega.
technically CDs came out in like the 80s, like
Yeah.
the earliest CDs, like they're just starting. They're not just starting. They're pretty much data rotted to hell and back. Sega games, like I my Sega CD and my PS1, they all still work. The games still work as long as the disc itself is in good condition. They're not hard to find games that are still working. It's just that eventually data rot will set in and you'll lose all that data, which is why digital preservation is so important, because the physical will break down. So even if you need to, like, because eventually servers break down too, but you can always transfer that data. Like generally you have when a server is going to die, usually, unless something crazy happens and your surge protector doesn't save your computer and then it fries it. But that's, if most people are serious about preservation. I'm not putting myself in that. I have a surge protector on my computer, but I'm not, I don't have backups on backups.
Server downstairs.
That's what I mean. That's the easiest way to do it. Just back it up. But yeah, so that was a very long-winded explanation. But video game history, video game preservation. I'm very passionate about it, and I really like talking about it.
No, I'm fine with that.
Actually, I do have a question for you. Have you ever done anything or seen anything as far as like some of like the metaverse stuff coming out, like metaverse games, anything like that?
It's Facebook, right?
I have no interest in metaverse games and like Web3 and NFTs and all that stuff. It's I could go on a whole rant about how it's a waste of time for everybody. I understand the technology behind. I understand the appeal of the technology, but so far everything I've seen I mean, realistically though, it should be preserved, regardless of my opinions on that. It should be preserved because it's a moment in time that whether it ends up taking off, which I hope it doesn't, but if it ends up taking off, then it's super important. And if it doesn't, it's a blip in history that deserves to be remembered because it really, it like people talk about it, like this NFTs and Web3 and all the whole like blockchain gaming and stuff like that, like and metaverse stuff, like that's all super important. But I think without going into a whole rant about it, my issues with it is that it's stuff that's already been done before, but now all of a sudden they make it preys on your FOMO. That's all it really is. Like, do you want to live in a digital alternate universe? You had Second Life that already existed, and now you have to pay for plots of land in Second Life. That's all the metaverse and all that stuff is. Then you have the play to earn thing that's a lot of people are touting. If you play games, you can earn your money back. Diablo 3 had a real money auction house and it ruined the game. Blizzard stopped it because it completely ruined the game for everybody. There's already examples of this not working. I'm not saying it won't ever work, but so far everything that I've seen, it's a dumb idea. But sorry, that's neither here nor there. I get that's an opening that it's hard for me to close when people bring that up because I get very angry.
So I'm just curious. I've heard this term metaverse thousands of times. Obviously, Facebook rebranded itself to Meta.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume this is the Oculus too. So what? I just literally just googled metaverse. Is it like an application under the Oculus or something like that? Like, what is it?
Honestly, I don't even know where you get access to it. I just know the idea of it is it's a digital world that you
Okay.
live in where people will literally buy people are buying digital plots of land to have their digital selves live on. And the
Like The
whole
Sims.
yeah, pretty much. But that's
Yeah.
why it's Second Life. Second Life was just that, but now the whole idea of like especially with the play to earn thing, I feel like people just miss out the idea of like generally people play games to relax. Like if you want to play games to earn money, you can either A do Twitch or get really good at the video game. But it's very strange that like they just like if it becomes play to earn, then you're just working a job, but it just takes place in a video game. So what's the difference? Like what's the point of the game at that point? Just go get we already have something like that.
Yeah, it's like you do your 9 to 5 and come home and you're doing that again, basically.
Well, and the fun of video games is that it's not work. And by play to earn, you turn it into work. So unless you really, and it's the same difference then for anyone with a non-gaming job. Like people could find a job they truly adore and be happy with it 9 to 5, but most people really won't. So,
All right,
I shouldn't say most people, but it's hard. But yeah,
I got a big question because I've been gaming since I was probably 4. I remember my mother giving me a Sega Genesis, Game Gear. I had an NES. Like I've been there. I've done that whole era. So I see behind there's a lot of PlayStation. I'm a diehard PlayStation fan. Can you please go into what you have back there on that wall?
sure. So up where I'm pointing right here is Super Nintendo. What you can't see on camera above that is NES. Down below, kind of behind this little PlayStation sign here, is a Sega Genesis, and I actually have Sega CD,
I love it.
Sega Master System. I have a bunch of NES and Super Nintendo like complete in the boxes. And you also can't see over there. There's like a whole shelf.
Is that Wii?
That's Wii where I'm pointing to, but
Yeah.
like on the screen I'm pointing to, but actually where I'm pointing to in the room is a shelf filled with like NES complete in box NES games. So yeah, I mean I've been collecting for about a decade or so now. And I consider myself a budget collector though. I would generally go to a convention and drop a couple hundred at the convention and then not do it at all again for the rest of the year. I might go to the store to a local retro store and like pick up something, here and there. Actually, what did I buy somewhat recently? I think it's downstairs. I bought Blue Dragon for the Xbox 360, and I am blanking on the other game that I bought. I think it was a cartridge game, but I can't remember what it is right now. That's gonna bother me.
I got a good question for you. So, like, I see all your games, so I'm gonna assume you have the consoles for each game. So what consoles
Yes.
do you currently own?
Consoles that I own: original Nintendo, Sega Saturn, N64, Wii, Super Nintendo, original Xbox. Sorry, I'm looking over to make
You're
sure I
fine.
get
You're
them
good.
all.
You're good.
PS2, Dreamcast, Sega Genesis, Sega CD, GameCube, Sega Master System,
Oh my God, you're in
um,
heaven.
360, PS3, Xbox One, Switch, Wii U. Downstairs is my PS4. And then the Sega Pico, which is not a lot of people know about. That's probably my most obscure one.
No PS5 yet?
No, I don't have the money for that. I have a kid now. I can't afford to drop
Yeah,
$500 on a thing.
I actually, like I said, luckily got a 5. It was above market value. I got it for 750. The disc, which you figure with tax, it's like 585, 600. So I was like, 100.
That's
I was
still
like,
I wouldn't
it's
spend
high.
a
It's
hundred
high. It is.
more.
It is. But
I wouldn't
I
pay a
had a
scalper for that.
coworker.
No way.
I had a
That's
coworker.
not a bad price
No,
though.
700, 750. I had a
For
coworker.
a scalper price, that's not a bad price.
I had a coworker who said, "Yo, my buddy's selling these. I know someone who's a diehard PlayStation fan, and he said 750." I was like, you know what? Yeah, I haven't gotten it in 11 months. I
Mhm.
was just like, at that point, I was like, you know what? Fine. So,
No,
but
I'd
then
rather. I can't. Nope. I could never do it because I always.
I didn't want to do it, but it was so difficult to get a PS5. Like, I've never heard of a system like in all my life. It was always you go to the store, you pre-order, it's there at the store. For some reason, after the coronavirus, they said we're not going to have it in stores anymore. Why?
it I mean, because it released at the worst possible time to launch it because a lot of stores they to curb the spread of it. And I understand the logistic. I understand the corona reason for it, but it's still. I think what frustrates me is that people just buy. They use bots to buy up all this inventory and then they resell it. And then
Annoying.
not all of them. Not all of them. If you're gonna be a scumbag and resell this stuff, at least be honest about it. I've seen people on Twitter being like, "We offer a service." I'm like, "You don't. You literally took a product away from somebody,
Want
and
it?
then be like, look how useful I am. I have this for you." Like I would have had it if you didn't buy all the entire run of it. It makes me mad.
Are you still want to? Do you want one? I'm not
But
saying I
not for
have any.
750.
No.
Not for 750.
That was
I would pay market retail. That's it. Maybe
550.
$50 higher. Maybe
Yeah.
$50 higher. But even then, no, thank you.
The
It just
time when I saw it, it was like that was like my highest number, and I'm sitting there, and I tried getting it at launch, and it was such a pain in the
oh,
ass.
I don't blame you, dude.
And I got
Just because
so
I'm really
frustrated.
against it. Yeah.
No. I was against it too, but I was like, at the time when I got it for 750, most of them were going for like 1100, 1200.
Oh,
And
like I said, that's a
750, I
great
was like,
first scalper price.
that is really low.
Yeah.
And then about 6 months later, my buddy gave me a free PC case, and then I just started building, and then
Here you are. PC is a lot, but even then, PC got hit by the COVID too because crypto miners were buying up all the parts.
yeah, my graphics card was I don't want to talk about it.
No, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. No, it's frustrating.
So we've all been there. So all your systems that you currently have, do you still every once in a while throw them into rotation to play?
Oh yeah. All of my systems right now, with the exception of the NES, because I brought it somewhere and I still haven't reset it back up, are always hooked up to two. I have two CRT televisions that you can't see off camera right now. I have two big tube TVs that you can't see, and they're always all hooked up to them. The only thing I have to do is they're all hooked into two power strips. Plug the two power strips in, TVs and all the consoles are ready to go.
I love it.
The only one I don't have hooked up because it's a bit harder is the Sega Pico. The Pico is a edutainment console. It literally looks like a laptop, like a briefcase that you flip open, and the cartridges are books. Like they're books with a cartridge bottom that you plug in. Like you put the cartridge in, and actually
I just looked it up. I never saw one or heard of it.
It's wild.
It looks like an iMac, only your own Mac.
It has a touch screen. So what happens is you put the cartridge in, you open up the book that's attached to the cartridge, and whatever page you are on will show up on the TV screen. And so then you tap on the book or on the pad itself, and it'll interact with stuff on and the screen will like react to it because it's so. For example, I have Pocahontas Riverbend Adventure for the Sega Pico. So if you see the scene with Pocahontas, if you tap on Pocahontas, maybe she'll say something or maybe she'll do something. It's stuff like that. So it was a relatively unknown like console, and I actually have it complete in box. I got it for a really good deal at a convention. But yeah, it's I think I was blown away by it. So every time you turn the page, it then the thing acknowledges it and shows up on the screen. This thing came out in '93, and it was a touch screen like that. It's pretty accurate too.
That's pretty insane. I'm sitting here looking back at all these games that I've ever had, and like, I remember with every PlayStation, it's always like you trade this in, you can use this as the purchase price of another one, and I'm kind of looking back and wish I never did that, because now I'm looking over my TV, and all I have sitting there is I have a PS2 Slim, a PS4, the original PS4, and a PS5, and I said I had the original PlayStation 1, I had the PS2, the big one, I had the OG PS3 with the Spider-Man font, which
Okay.
I think that was the most capable console because it could do PS1, 2, 3, and then I got rid of it and I didn't think about it. Now I'm looking back and I'm like, I wish I had the 1 and the 3.
They're expensive to get too. They're expensive.
The
Like
OG
the
one?
backwards compatible PS3, yeah, it's a little bit more pricey. You can, I mean, it's not crazy. You can get it for like, I believe it's like under 300. But I've been out of the collector's game for a little bit just because, once again, being a parent, like I can't really justify spending hundreds of dollars every year on a collection. But I at least use my collection for the podcast, so it kind of works out. And also when I stream on Twitch, so it kind of works out a little
I
bit.
think I remember the reason was my PS3. I had a PS3 and I had to send it out. Something I think it was the light. There was a red light or something. It's something like Xbox had it, and then I remember getting rid of it and getting the other PS3, the second version. It wasn't the glossy looking one.
That's the one. That's the version I have. Is the second version, like the slim. Yeah, I like
the
it.
OG with all of the memory slots that you didn't even need, but they're like, yeah, I have it.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
I love that. But yeah, no, I don't play as often as I'd like to anymore, just because once again, parenting. Like, and in all honesty, a lot of my nights are spent to either doing podcasts such as this or editing my own podcast. Like this week, you guys are kicking off a busy week for me. I am recording tonight, obviously. Then I'm recording Tuesday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then Sunday night again next week.
Wow.
I have a busy weekend.
Schedule.
Yeah, I'm gonna be tired.
And I think I saw you just hit eight. Was it 825 episodes?
No. I'm like 220 something.
220. Yeah,
my
fault.
Yeah.
That's a great accomplishment, especially.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
That's very very busy. I did actually when I was first scrolling through some of your podcasts on Spotify, one caught my eye immediately, and it was the Command and Conquer ones because I'm a huge Red Alert fan. I always loved playing those games, and I think you guys got into Tiberian Warfare. I think
we end up doing the entire run. There's a Command and Conquer Part 1 and Part 2. Part 2 came out already in March or April of this year. Part 1 was back in November of last year. Because at that time, I was doing a history of RTS series. I was looking at all of like the real-time strategy genre and like all the games that came before it and molded it and made it into what it was. And then I got into like the mid 90s, like 97, 98, and it went from like 10 possible RTS games a year to like 30 or 40. And like, I don't have time to sift through 30 or 40 games. And if you're looking from like 97 onward, there's like 30 to 40 games for like, maybe not 30, maybe like 20 to 30. It's still a lot though, but like 20 to 30 games each year up until like 2005 or something like that. So that's like almost a full decade of like just sifting through like over 100 different games. I'm like, I was doing it once a month, but I couldn't keep up with it while also trying to release weekly content for the podcast. Like if I was doing just that, I could do it in once a month, no problem. But I had other shows to worry about. I had to dedicate a lot of time to editing, and those History of RTS episodes were scripted. A lot of my stuff isn't normally scripted, but because I was trying to relay a ton of information all at once, I scripted all those out. So it took a long time. It took a long time
Oh
to do.
yeah,
So
I'm sure
I just I ran out of time. And
that's
they were
probably
only short. They were short. They were like 10, 15 minutes. They were like
I only
15, 20
played
minutes
like
or
one
so.
of them. So you said Command and Conquer. The only ones I ever played, and I remember because in like 03, 04, I had a phase where I went from like PS2. Then I was like, all right, let's swap over into PC. I got a Gateway 510G, which I remember was their gaming PC at the time, and I remember it was like Madden something, Madden 03 or 04, Battlefield 1942 because I just dropped around that time, and the
Hmm.
third game I got was Command and Conquer Generals, and then Generals
Okay.
Zero Hour,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I was hooked on that. And
It's
that's
a
the
good
time
game.
when I was playing all the Roller Coaster Tycoons was right around the same time. And by the way, I was playing Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 probably about last week for like an hour and a half because they have like an open modded version and
Hmm.
it's addicting still to this day.
I mean, it's a big scene out there. There's what was it? Who was it? There's a YouTube channel called, what are they called? Something clip. Zero clip. I'm gonna be mad that I can't
You're
remember.
good. You look it up.
I'm gonna look it up real quick. But they did an episode on, you know what, I was looking up it on my phone, but I realized I don't see on my list of
You
the
have the PC in
channels I've
front of you.
subscribed to. Yeah, I have the PC in front of me. Like, why would I use that? Uh, I am blanking on what they're called, but basically they did an episode. They do these really well done, like detailed video game documentaries, and they didn't no clip. That's what it's called. No clip, all one word.
They did one on it.
They did one on Roller Coaster Tycoon. They've also done some. They do a lot of modern games because they actually go to the developers and they interview the developers. So they did one on Horizon Zero Dawn. That was really good. That was really
Oh,
interesting to watch.
no clip. You said.
Yeah, no clip, all one word. NOCLIP.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
They're
see it.
fantastic documentaries. I've watched a couple of them, and they're all really good. But they've done a bunch on like, Half Life and let's see, they did one 4 years ago on CD Project Red and how they got started. The Witcher team. So
hmm
they do a
Follow
lot
them.
of good stuff.
Followed.
They're worth checking out. But yeah, so that's what they do. But
Um,
yeah,
what was I gonna say? Sorry. So I see you have a Vita behind there. I never
I
had a
do.
Vita. I had the original PSP, and I think to this day, I still think that I left it at my buddy's house at the time, and he stole it, and I just kind of let it go. But that's neither here nor there. How's the Vita?
Oh, it's great. It's a super underrated console in my opinion. It suffered a lot from what Nintendo handhelds do, where there's a gimmick, and then people try to like cram the gimmick into every single thing without actually giving any thought behind, like, does this work for the game I'm making? There's a handful of games that do it really well. Gravity Rush for the Vita is one of the best games I've ever played. The motion controls work really well. The Uncharted game for it is really good. I would say the best game that utilizes the Vita is like, because the Vita has like a back touchpad. It's got a touch screen. It's got a gyro in it. It's got like two back facing cameras and like a front facing camera. And there's a game on it called Tearaway from the same people who did Little Big Planet, Media Molecule. And that game is genius. I have never played a game that integrated like the gimmicks of a console so perfectly, other than Wii Sports. Wii Sports works really well for the Wii's whole, motion control gimmick.
Yeah.
But Tearaway is astonishing. It's a really, really good game. It's this like the visual style is amazing. The art direction is like incredible. It's all like papercraft, so it's like construction paper built world, and every time that you like, because it's a third person kind of platformer game, and every time you look up at the sky and look at the sun, the sun is your face. Like it has the front facing camera looking at you. And so the whole idea is that you are peering down into this world and playing with all these characters. So every time you look up at the sun, you see you staring into the world. It's kind of crazy. It's really well done. One of the best games I've played in a long while, but it's been a minute since I've played it too. But Tearaway's great. And yeah, the Vita had a lot of great games, but it just there was a Killzone, not Liberation. What's it called? I'm blanking on what the game it is for it. I don't have it in front of me.
You got a PSP also? Is that to the right? Up
Yeah.
there? Do you
So
have a PSP?
a lot of my handhelds. I forgot all my handhelds. You were asking me all the different consoles I have. I
Give me
forgot
them
the
all.
handhelds. Vita, PSP, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, DS, DS Lite, 3DS, Game Gear. Am I missing one?
Game Boy Advance?
I have Game Boy Advance. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention. I have the original model, and I also have the oh my gosh, the little square thing. Why am I blanking on the name of that thing? It's the not Game Boy Micro, not Game Boy Micro.
The
It's
DS.
No,
not
he
the
said
DS. No, it's
Switch. You got a Nintendo Switch?
yeah, it's Switch. I have a Switch, but no, that's not it.
Who knew it's one he forgot?
No, oh my god, why can't I remember the name of this stupid thing? It's gonna really make me mad.
The original
GB
Game Boy?
No,
Non-color?
it's a Game Boy Advance. It's a type of Game Boy Advance.
3DS?
SP, Game Boy Advance SP. Holy shoo, I could not remember
There's too
that.
many of them. But do you have this for the original Game Gear?
I do not. Yo, actually, since you're a Game Gear fan, hold on.
I love Sega.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna show
You're
you
good.
something.
You're good. I need to get batteries for this thing, or like a charger. This is like.
What the hell is
I mean,
that?
So what this is, it magnifies the view,
Oh,
and so it helps. But usually you play like this.
I gotcha.
I'm missing the covers,
I re-
obviously. the
I
back,
remember that thing
but-
you would plug into the back of like the Game Boy, and then you'd like flip it over, and there's like a little light, and it's like a magnifying glass.
Yeah, the worm.
Not the worm.
A Game Gear carrying case.
I have one. I have
Oh.
one somewhere. I don't know where it is, but mine is it's like almost like a velour or
Holy
velvet.
shit!
What?
I do have it.
Oh my god.
Yeah, yours is a little different. Yours is a little different than mine, look.
Look,
But yes,
freaking nerds.
let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that.
Yours actually has like a light in it. That's why the Game Gear was super ahead of its time too. It was one of the first. It was one of the first.
1000%.
One of the first backlit systems. It was in full color, but it just ate batteries. It had like a 4-hour battery life, and it
why
used
it's not in
6
the
double
back.
A's.
Yeah, look at it. It's like, give me battery.
Here's mine. Well, these I have two actually. I have 2 Game Gears.
So somehow I got liquid under the screen. I don't know, but I saw somewhere on TikTok someone was taking the Game Gear and rebuilding it, and then they put an OLED screen in it, and I was like, oh, I need to do that because like this, I never want to get rid of this console. This thing's great.
I'm just putting this thing down now. Yeah, no, the Game Gear is super ahead of its time. There is actually, I almost got my hands on. I have a Game Hunter friend who found it, and he ended up selling it. He said he was going to give it to me, but he ended up selling it. It was the first ever like handheld video game console with like swappable cartridges. It was the Microvision. I think it was from Mattel. It came out in the late 70s.
I never
And-
heard of that.
Yeah, it was really weird where it's almost like it's hard to explain exactly. Like I
now.
don't
The
Yeah,
little
that-
stick.
yeah. Yep. That's the Microvision. It is I think it was from Mattel.
It was $50 in 1979. That's equivalent to $325 as of last year.
Yay, inflation.
Inflation, right?
Yo, you want to hear something? Just thinking of like monetary values and whatnot. This ties in with video game history. Have you ever heard of the game series Sword Quest for the Atari 2600?
I
No.
have not.
Sword Quest. I'm going to have to bring up the Wikipedia article. Don't bring it up because it'll ruin the surprise of this. Because Sword
You're good.
Quest is wild. So I actually have the majority of this whole story memorized. It's this. I'll tell you where I have to read off of Wikipedia because there's no way in hell I would remember the specifics of this. So back in the heyday of Atari, in the golden age of Atari, see Atari. There was a video game market crash in 1983, but that was only in North America. The video games were fine in Japan and Europe, but in North America, the console market was gone. PC still kind of existed, but it was in its nascent stages because it was expensive to own a computer back in the late 70s, early 80s, unless you were a company. So, Sword Quest was a game developed in-house by Atari. I believe it was in-house. Yeah, developed in-house by Atari, and it was going to be a 4-part series. There was 4 games that was going to come out: Earthworld, Waterworld, Fireworld, and Airworld. And the way it would work is that you would get the game. Packaged with the game in the box was a comic book done by, I don't know if it was done by DC Comics or not, but at least the comics were made, like the artists and the writers and whatnot were made by some legends in the industry. The recently passed George Perez, he was the artist for these comic books in the Sword Quest games. And I think Dick Giordano also worked on the comic books. So I don't know much about comics. I just know those are big names in it. Oh yeah, Jerry Conway and Roy Thomas also was the writers, and then George Perez worked on the art. But in any case, so you would play through the game, and when you get to a certain screen, as you progress through the game, as you discover more and you solve the puzzles, it would give you a page number and a panel number, and then you'd open up the Sword Quest book, the comic, and the comics told their own stories. I don't know much about the stories of the comics, but they told their own stories. But what you do is you would go to that page, go to that panel number, and hidden in that panel was a secret word, and you'd have to play through the whole game and write down all the secret words. At the end of it, once you beat the game and you have all your secret words, you had to unscramble the sentence because you had to put them all together into a sentence that made sense, and it had to be the correct sentence. And there was usually a hint at the beginning of the comic books telling you kind of like what the sentence should be. Then you submit that into Atari. And the winners of, if you got it right, then you were invited to come to Atari to go through one final level for that game. You know, all the people who got Earthworld correctly, that was the first game that came out, got to go to Atari and compete in one final competition. The winner of that would win a prize worth $25,000, and that's in 1981 money. Adjust that for inflation. Last time I checked, I did a video on this a year or two ago. It was like a very, I made a joke about it.
What
Like
year
it was a very
it?
nice 80. Ooh, that's a good question. 82.
25K.
25K in 1982. Back in 2020, it was worth a very nice $69,000. But I don't know what it's worth now with the inflation that we have right now.
75K.
75K. So tripling it, right? So just think of all the numbers I'm going to throw out there, just triple it for what today's monetary value is. So $25,000, but it wasn't like they handed you 25K. You won an actual piece of treasure, and the winner of Earthworld won the Talisman of Penultimate Truth. Here's where I read off Wikipedia because I could not remember this otherwise. The Talisman of Penultimate Truth is an 18-karat solid gold disc studded with 12 diamonds and the birthstones of the 12 zodiacs, along with a miniature white gold sword set atop it. You would win that. Like that's insane for a game. Like what kind? That's FU levels of money that Atari is just like, here, have this $25,000 piece of gold. It's nuts. So that was the first one. And what was going to happen is that the winners, they were going to do the same thing for Fireworld, which was the second game, Waterworld, which was the third game, and Airworld, the fourth game. And they were going to do the same thing, you know, figure out the secret message, send it in, play one final level, win the challenge. And the winners of those 4 were going to come back for one final challenge. They were going to bring all 4 winners back to be the ultimate master of whatever this is. But let me read some of these prizes, right? So the winner of Fireworld won the Chalice of Light, which was a goblet made out of platinum and gold, studded with diamonds, rubies, sapphires, pearls, and green jade. The winner of Waterworld was got the Crown of Life, which was a solid gold crown decorated with diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and aquamarines. The winner of Airworld won the Philosopher's Stone, which was a large piece of white jade in an 18-karat gold box encrusted with emeralds, rubies, and diamonds. And like I said, they were all going to come together for a final prize. The winner of that final prize, the 4 winners coming together for one final showdown again, would win the Sword of Ultimate Sorcery, which was a silver blade with an 18-karat gold handle covered with diamonds, emeralds, sapphires, and rubies, and it was valued at $50K back in 1982. So once again, that's like
50.
150K now. Here's the tragic part. Remember I said there was a video game crash?
Yeah.
This started in 1982. The crash happened in 83. So
Right away.
Earthworld and Fireworld, the winners, they got their prizes. Waterworld did get released, but it was a limited release. Like you had to subscribe to Atari's like magazine, and then you had to do a mail order for it, so you couldn't even get it in the store. So that's like 2 layers of like trying to get this stuff. You had it mail ordered, but it also had to be, it was only available to people who were subscribed to Atari's magazine. Airworld, the fourth game, never got released. I don't know if there's any prototypes out there of it, but there's never been released. And so Earthworld, the person won. It's known, like, unfortunately they had to smelt down, so that the original prize, the Talisman of Penultimate Truth, is gone. It's just gone. The winner of Fireworld, who got the Chalice of Light, that apparently is still last I checked, it's still around. Like they didn't get if they got rid of it, but it's still in one physical piece. I don't know if they kept it or if they got rid of it, but as far as I'm aware, it's still in one piece. Supposedly someone won the Waterworld level or the Waterworld challenge for the Crown of Life, but no one really knows who won. And the Philosopher's Stone for Airworld and that Sword of Ultimate Sorcery, no one knows what happened to them. There are pictures of them existing. You can Google it and find pictures of them in a display case. So they made all of these things, but once Atari pretty much almost went under in 1983 from the video game market crash, no one really knows what happened to those last two prizes.
That's wild.
It's crazy.
Not to bring up the metaverse thing again, but have you ever seen Ready Player One?
I have not. People keep telling me I should watch it though.
So they actually do something extremely similar to that, where it's, everyone is like struggling to get just past one challenge, and basically you need to like understand what the developer was thinking, and you're able to go back into like archives. I don't want to like spoil it for you. It's interesting as far as like how things go in that movie, but like basically how you describe that, like literally almost like not to a T, but very close of like how they made that movie, like just reminds me of like how you just described it, and that's like actually like super cool. Like I wouldn't think like anyone would have done that like back in the 80s.
One of my favorite things about video game history is looking at stuff like that was like surprisingly ahead of its time, and just being like, whoa, this existed back, before we expected it to. Perfect example. Pete, you're a huge Sega fan. The Sega Channel for the Sega Genesis, which not a lot of people know about or have heard about.
In a
Have you
while.
heard of it?
I might have, but it's like I said, I haven't been on Sega since I was like actively since maybe like 9, 10.
So the Sega Channel was an online subscription service for your Sega Genesis, where you could download games to a cartridge. There was like it was very limited, and it was incredibly expensive to do. Like your parents had to be loaded in order to able to afford this service. But there was actually games. There was actually games released exclusively on this service. There's a game called Pulseman, which was developed by it was pre-Pokemon, but Game Freak. Game Freak made a 2D
I remember
platformer.
Game Freak. I do remember that name now. You're saying that.
Yep, they're the developers of Pokemon, the creators of Pokemon.
Yeah.
But pre-Pokemon, they made a 2D platformer called Pulseman, it was only ever physically released in Europe, and that if you want to get that copy, that's a little expensive. I have a ROM hack
I'm
somewhere
looking
back
that
there
up
on my
right
shelf.
now. Pulseman,
But
you said?
the Pulseman, all one word. But the
Yeah.
North American release was only on the Sega channel. And likewise, there was a game called Mega Man The Wily Wars, which was pretty much just like a Sega Genesis upscale of Mega Man like 1 through 3 or something like that.
It literally looks like Mega Man. I'm looking at it now. Like the cover of Pulseman.
Yeah. Pulseman is different than it, but yeah, it's
The concept.
fascinating. Yeah. So it's interesting. So yeah, there was games that were released exclusively for that over in North America. Super Nintendo had a similar service called Satellaview, which was like satellite distribution, but that only happened in Japan. It never came over to the US. There was actually an original Legend of Zelda game that was released in episodes for the Satellaview on the Super Nintendo, but Super Famicom over in Japan. So yeah, so like stuff like that where it's like, wait, you could go online like before like the Dreamcast is
Dial-up?
known to be like the first one, the first like console with built-in network functionality, which it was. It was the first console that allowed you to, without any add-ons, you could plug directly in. But if you go back to even like the Atari 2600, there was a service called OnLive. Um, Let me just double check if I'm right with that. So, was it OnLive? There
I'm sitting
was.
here.
I'm just gonna search online Atari to see if I can find it. But there was there was like I think it was called OnLive. If gonna be so mad at myself if I can't remember what it is. Yeah, so I googled Atari 2600 Game Line. That's what it's called, not OnLive. Game Line. And it similar service. It was a dial-up game distribution service for the Atari 2600 that I read off of Wikipedia. But yeah, it
Way
came
back.
out. Yeah, and it was I don't know if it has any dates here, but yeah, you could go online with your you could technically go online with your Atari 2600 and download games to your Atari 2600 back in the 70s. It was not popular. It was not a big service,
Mainstream
but
thing, yeah.
yeah. So and I'm sure it wasn't very easy to do, but yeah, it's crazy. So I'm always fascinated by stuff like that, where like, things that existed back before you would expect them to. Or like another perfect example, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest for the NES. That game is actually an open world game with a day and night cycle that you can explore around, and the enemies change depending on like whether you're playing during day or during night. It's not well done, but the fact that you have an NES game that's open world and you can explore wherever you want, it's on a 2D plane, of course, but it's technically open world, and there's a day and night cycle, and things change between day and night. Villagers appear during the day, monsters appear during the night. You can only talk to people or things during certain times, whether it's day or night. But it's crazy to think that actually technically existed back on the NES. So
I
stuff like
remember
that.
I remember like not this Game Boy Color, but I have an original. This is the see-through one. I have an original somewhere, limited edition. I don't know the Pokemon, the yellow one, Pikachu one. I don't. And I remember my parents telling me they got that at like 5 in the morning on like a Black Friday for me, and I forget which game it was, but I remember like it was one of the Pokemon games that came out with like a day and night cycle. And I remember reading it in Electronic Gaming Monthly because I used to subscribe to that magazine, and that came
Hmm.
out. And I thought that was like the most insane idea that like day and night cycle in a video game, and now it's so common.
Hmm.
I remember the first game I remember that really had that was Ocarina of Time. And I remember you used to be able to it was like open world exploration except it was 3D. But and I remember like you would get monsters at night, you would get villagers during the day. You had to do certain tasks during the day or possibly wait till night. It's kind of interesting to hear that that was done on the NES before like previous or I'm sorry, generations of consoles after that.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. Like I'm sure there's a game that did it before that too. Like you'd be surprised what like some of the things that old games could do. There was a game. So when I was doing my history of RTS series that I mentioned before, there was a game that I looked into called Utopia, and it was for the Intellivision. Actually, there's another console I forgot that I have. I actually have. It's an Intellivision or a ColecoVision. I can't remember. I have one of those two somewhere in my game room here. I think it's an Intellivision. I think I have two Intellivisions. But the Intellivision was made by Mattel, and there's a game on it called Utopia. And Utopia, it was a strategy game. It wasn't an RTS game. You didn't, like get workers, build up an economy, go get a military, then go conquer land. It was more it was very primitive. It was definitely a predecessor to the RTS, but it wasn't an RTS. And basically you had to colonize this island. You had to survive on this island, and you'd have to send your boat to go out fishing, and you'd have to harvest crops so that way you could expand your population. So you wouldn't actually see people on the screen, but you would see like a population account. And the whole idea was supposed to build this utopian society. But then you would have, like, if you did a poor job, then people would people would revolt, and you get more robbers and bandits because you're doing a bad job. So people are, they're having to resort to dastardly evil things in order to survive. So yeah, it came out, I'm just double checking, it came out in 1982. This came out pre-NES, and it was 1982, which is just nuts to me, but it was super interesting, and it was actually a two-player game, but very primitive two-player, because there's no, it doesn't have an AI opponent, so technically you would have to play with somebody else. But if you just want to play, against yourself, technically I guess you could, but you choose how many rounds you want to play, how long each round is going to be. Sorry, 1 second, I have a tickle. Do I have water up here? I felt that coming. I'm like, no. That water was from like 5 days ago. I hope it's okay. I'm good. I'm good now. Okay. Or was, oh yeah. So, and basically, whoever gets the most points at the end of at the end of all the rounds wins, and you control, like, you have to build fishing boats, and you have to keep your population happy, and there's like a whole algorithm like working in the back of the game that kind of determines it. It's like very proto Civ and Sim City and all this other stuff, because you build buildings and stuff like that. It's incredibly ahead of its time. It's arguably one of the most influential games of all time, but no one really knows much about it. I didn't know much about it until I started digging into this. And in like video game fan circles, like a lot of people do know this, but I didn't know because I didn't grow up with the Intellivision. Like, Intellivision came out in like, oh God, what year? I don't even know off the top of my head. I think it was like late 70s, early 80s. I'm gonna double check right now. 79. That was 10 years before I was even born. So
yeah.
Here it is. You got me here going like old school, like I remember as a kid. I remember I had the Genesis, and now I'm looking at it. I had the Sega Genesis and Sega. Oh my God! Why did I get rid of it? Oh my God! I just looked at the price and I want to throw up. So,
is it the Nomad?
No. Oh Peggy! So the Sega Genesis and the Sega CD combo on eBay is going for $5K, and
don't trust that. Don't trust that.
I'm just looking at it.
I can guarantee you a Sega Genesis. Now this is
the combo one, right? Or it's next to next.
Well, they're two separate attachments. You can remove the Genesis and it works perfectly fine. The CD
connected next to each other.
I actually have that one. I have the Genesis and the CD connected to each other. But pre-pandemic, I don't know what the prices are now, but pre-pandemic, like, you could have gotten both of those for like under $200, like,
Why'd they
easily.
say $5,000?
Because they're scalpers, and people, because video games are a hot commodity now. This will be an interesting topic to talk about.
Bring it
the
on.
video game collectors market is a crapshoot right now. So, long story short, there's two factors to this actually. Let's boil this down to two factors. The market was starting to wane, but then when the pandemic hit, everyone was like, "We're stuck inside. I need to find something to do." So I just want to play video games and remember like that I played as a kid. And there's a podcast I listened to where one of the guys works at a game store. He was a manager there, and he was saying people would just come in and they would ask for an NES, and they were like, "Sorry, we're out of NESs." So he's like, "All right, what about a Sega?" "Sorry, we're out of Segas." And they would literally just go down the list until they got a Wii. Like they didn't care; they just wanted video games. Like that's how bad people wanted video games during the market, during the beginning of the pandemic. And because of that, because everyone was going back and buying, like it was a huge surge of new people into the market. Prices skyrocketed. GameCube is astronomical right now. Like it's nuts. Prices have gone through the roof. So that's the first thing. Then no, it sucks, but I don't have any issue with that. You know, like shit happens. That's what happens when the market gets popular. There's more competition. The prices are going to go up. No issue. It's frustrating, but like I don't mind that. The other half of it, the reason why more people are getting into it now, is because there's a grading company called Wada Games. Uh, there's and you know just like how you do with like you grade your comics or you grade your Magic cards or whatever. Like there's grading companies that will grade the quality of whichever product you have and gives it a rating. People are starting to sell these graded games, and normally that would not be an issue. In fact, there is already a video game grading company. I forget what it was called, but it existed for like over 10 years. Like this isn't new. Wada is relatively new. And so what happened was Wada was invested in by this guy named Jim Halpern, and Jim Halpern runs a website called Heritage Auctions. And Heritage Auction, Wada will offer a pipeline to sell your graded game directly through Heritage Auction. So as soon as you send it off and they grade it, you don't have to even see it again. They can put it right up for auction, like you can sell it. And for years leading up to this, like people from Wada would go on TV and start kind of like boosting the values of games. Like if you go on, there's a couple of times on Pawn Stars where they would be called in, and that's probably one of the most popular shows right now for appraising the value of like pop culture and stuff like that.
Love Pawn Stars.
It's a fun show.
Great show.
And
yeah.
so they so that whatever, they're trying to make their products seem more valuable, but that's not where it really. The issue was is that they for a while they weren't releasing population reports. So once people started seeing some value come into this, perfect example, a sealed graded copy of Super Mario 64 sold for over $1 million. It sold over like 1 or 2 million, and it makes no sense. Because this is how you can tell people who are in it, who aren't into retro gaming. Super Mario 64 is not a rare game. There's millions of them. There's literal millions of copies of
It's like
Super Mario
Pokemon
64.
Stadium.
Exactly. Like it's insane how many copies there are. So a sealed copy would definitely go for a couple hundred, maybe even a couple thousand. I depends on what people in the market are willing to pay for it. But that it was such a drastic increase. Like you could probably get sealed games for a couple grand, even graded sealed games for a couple grand, not $1 million. Like it was like 1.5 mil or something like that. And then later on, there was a sealed original Super Mario Brothers. It sold for like over 2 million or something like that. And that one's even more sketchy, which I'll get into. But it's basically it's very odd. And the fact is that then once a sale like that happens and they're not releasing population reports, everyone's just flooding the market and people are buying them up. But people, like, why would someone who knows about how many copies were sold of that video game would ever spend over $1 million for a sealed graded one? You could literally get your own sealed graded one. You could literally get your own sealed one and then send it to a grading company for like only a couple thousand. Like there's no there's no reason for that. Now I'm not even that well versed in this. If someone who's interested in really like breaking this down, you have to go through the archive of their stuff. But there's a podcast called the Completely Unnecessary Podcast with Pat the NES Punk and his friend Ian Ferguson, and they kind of talk through this whole thing. In fact, so much so, all this collusion, potential alleged collusion, um, Wada Games is getting sued right now by a collector's circle because they've artificially inflated the prices by doing this, by constantly overvaluing the games. They have people selling games that they themselves graded. Like you can see it. Like there's been proof of this where people who work for WADA will grade their own games, appraise it very high and appraise the value very high, and then sell it to then boost the market. It's super shitty. It's super sketchy, super shady. And uh the 2 million Mario seller, the way that even came about is that people bought shares of that game like it's a stock. There's a website you can do this. Like you can, so 300 people can chip in $100 to this one sealed graded game, and then when all of them agree to do it, then they can sell it for a profit. So you're literally just investing in stocks at this point, but it's a video game, and that's weird to me. Like I'm not saying it's like like evil or bad. It's just weird. Like that just seems inherently like why do you need video games to do this? Why couldn't you do this with stocks or like anything else? Like this isn't a company that you're investing in. This is like a random item. Like you may never even see the game that you spent $100 on. How do you know it even exists at that point? It's very weird.
That is strange.
I don't know what to make of it. Like I think it's dumb, and I think it's kind of shady and like not really good. But at the same time, it's just I don't know. I don't know what to think of it. It's strange. So
sorry, you're good. Keep going.
no, I was just gonna say that they invest like a couple hundred people invested in this sealed Super Mario Bros. Game that was graded. They sold it for 2 million, and they all made bank on it. Like more power to them, but it's very weird. And that was sold on Heritage auctions. Like that game, even though the website that they all kind of put all their shares in, it was not tied with Heritage directly, but um Heritage is like a big thing with it. Like the guy who created Heritage is a guy named Jim Halpern, and he already has criminal records against on him for doing a similar thing for artificially inflating the stamp collecting market back in the 80s, and he was convicted of it. So this guy has done it before, and now it's happening with video games. So it just seems very like
Whenever you see Jim Halper, I'm thinking The Office.
yeah. Wait, is it? Hold on. Maybe I'm misquoting it then. I'm gonna look up Heritage auctions.
So you got me going back in my history with all this video game history, and I appreciate it. And I'm just like I remember I had the Genesis. I went to the Sega CD, then I went to PlayStation, and that's been my history since. Now I'm looking back. I'm over here on Wikipedia right now, and apparently the Sega Saturn, that was before the Dreamcast. It apparently was like the biggest flop in gaming history.
Oh yeah.
Did you do like a podcast on that? And like, I mean, it looks like a pretty legit console, but it only lasted like 2 years.
Yeah, I haven't done an episode on it, but the long and the short of that is Sega so Sega of America and Sega of Japan hated each other. They did not. Sega of America was very, I mean, you remember the marketing for Sega Genesis stuff. It was very like in your face, very 90s, very, very 90s.
Yeah.
In a good way, in my opinion, but it was very 90s. But it was very in your face, and that's not a Japanese sensibility at all. So Sega of Japan hated it, and they were constantly butting heads. So they needed a console to compete because this Genesis was getting long in the tooth. The PS1 was coming out. I think it came out in like 94 in Japan. So like they were
Something like that, yeah.
so and like I think 95 in the US or something like that. So they were desperate to keep the Genesis relative until they could get their own 32-bit console in. Well, they did something like that. They made an add-on to the Sega Genesis called the 32X, which plugged in on the top of your Sega Genesis where the cartridge slot is, and it would upgrade your 16-bit Genesis to a 32-bit Genesis. It was called the
Wait, was it
32.
like a little adapter piece? Because I
Yeah, it
do
was an
remember
adapter.
having
It was
that.
an adapter piece. Yeah, it
Yes,
was a little
I
adapter
did
piece that
have
you
that
plugged
then.
in. So that's actually worth a lot of money now. Not like obscene amounts, but like at least like
Come on.
a
Everything I
almost
get rid
all
of. Now I'm gonna look this
almost
up.
all retro stuff is worth something
Stop.
now. Almost all.
Stop.
I shouldn't say almost all, but like anything that like most people have heard of, it's probably going to be worth a little something. Not saying like
32X,
32x is probably like you're probably looking at a lot.
350. I see a lot
Yeah,
of them at
I
350,
don't know if it's worth that
$400.
much. That could just be eBay scalpers, but 350 seems not too far crazy. I
Yes,
would
I
probably
did have
estimate.
that.
Yeah, I would say it's
260.
probably. Yeah, I would say in between like 150 and 250 would be my guesstimate. But,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So they released the 32x, and I'm going to have to check the release dates for this because the Sega 32X came out in 1994, November 94 in the US. It was actually marketed, I believe, specifically towards the US, but I am not quite sure. So they released that in November 21st, 1994 in the US. And the Saturn was out in Japan already in 1994, like one day later in Japan in 1994. So they were going to release the Saturn in the fall of 95 in the US, in North America. And they saw that they wanted to beat Sony to the market. They were afraid that if they came out at the same time, Sony would run through them. So they wanted to beat Sony to the market so they could get an established foothold in the 32-bit console era. And hopefully that would solidify them and maybe run Sony out of the market. Problem was they made this decision very last minute. It wasn't like the release date for the Saturn in the US was May 11th, 95. It was not intended to be that early. It was supposed to be a fall release, but they're like, we got to beat Sega. So it was like E3 or whatever that big press show is. I don't know if it was E3, but it was a big press show in 95. And it was supposed to be out, like I said, like a couple months later. They said that day, hey, this is out now. You can go out and buy it. Retailers didn't know this. They didn't even have stock or inventory, so they were pissed off at Sega. A lot of consumers, understandably, did not know this and were surprised by this. They didn't save up money for it because this was $400 back in 1994. So,
Money.
it's a lot of money. So consumers weren't ready to buy it because they were expecting a November release date. Game developers suddenly had their development time cut 4 months short. Or maybe not exactly 4 months, but it was cut short because they were definitely pushed to rush those games out. So you had a console that was rushed to release that was preceded by another 32-bit console from the same console publisher. Because remember, 32X came out. There is a 32-bit console technically came out in 94. 6 months later, like 7 months later, they released their official 32-bit console, the Saturn, also in North America. So now you have two 32-bit consoles in your own market, and you're splitting your market in half. So now your Saturn is floundering and your 32X is floundering instead of combining the two. Because the Sega fans, like, most likely you couldn't afford both. And even if you wanted the 32X, you would need the Genesis to play it in the first place. So people would spend, like, I think the 32X wasn't outlandishly expensive. I think it was like 150 or something like that, even at launch. Maybe I'm misremembering that. But they release the 32X in the Saturn. It splits their market. They release the Saturn way too early. On top of that, the Saturn is insanely hard to program for and develop for because unlike other 3D based consoles, Saturn is actually kind of more geared towards like 2D game design. The PS1, the N64, every 3D console we know now, polygons are based off of triangles. Like it's just a series of triangles connected to create the 3D people and characters that we see.
The image.
The image. The Saturn used squares or rectangles. So it was a completely different it throws off all the geometry. So when you're porting a game from a PS1 to a Saturn, it's not like you can just port it over. Like it's the architecture is so foreign, just the way it handles polygons is
Different.
completely different.
Yeah. Sucks because, at the end of the day, I kind of wish Sega was still in there. That's all. That's all I really got to say. Like, that was my OG. That was my OG system growing up as a kid, and it is what it is.
Sega is one of the most interesting game or console publishers because they consistently push the envelope with everything they did. Even in the arcade, they were very successful in the arcade, and no one really talks about it that much anymore. They like in the 80s and 90s, they were super successful in the arcade. They did a lot of great stuff with arcade hardware. So they pushed the envelope in the arcade with their home consoles. I mean, Sega is arguably one of the most important console manufacturers and game developers because they got rid of Nintendo's monopoly in the U.S. market. Nintendo, for all intents and purposes, had a monopoly. They controlled 90% of the video game market at its height in like 89 or 90 or something like that. Sega brought that down to where they actually had. I think Sega had more than Nintendo for a short amount of time with the Genesis. The Genesis was so popular that it actually outsold the Super Nintendo for quite some time. It wasn't until like 94 when things started like changing up because I think it's when like Super Nintendo it kind of started when Super Nintendo got Street Fighter 2 before Sega did, but then it also, Super Nintendo in 94 got Donkey Kong Country, which looked way ahead of its time because of the 3D quote unquote graphics, and Super Metroid is a beautiful game and stuff like that. That's also 94 release. So Sega is a super important developer because it really created the console wars as we know it today. So much so that, like, I mean, you may have already heard this is a relative. I hope this doesn't come off as egotistical, but like a lot of, I feel like a lot of people know this, but just in case they don't, Sega or Nintendo created the PlayStation.
I do know that. And they
Yeah,
did the split, and then PlayStation, Sony's like, you know
they,
what? Right here. You know what? I'm doing it
yeah,
myself. Yep.
exactly. And because of the failed CD add-on for the Super Nintendo, you get the PlayStation, and you also get Philips CDI, which is another mess of a console story. That is I don't know
We'll
that
save
much
that.
about other. I don't even know that much about it. I just know it's a mess of a console.
Josh, I think we're gonna have to definitely get you back on for another episode. We're
100%. We're
we're
splitting this.
we're getting some like really cool information out of you, and I definitely want to like split this up a little bit. But before
All
we leave
right.
off, I do have a question for you.
Yes,
You said you're on Twitch.
I am.
Now, do you do like a lot of retro games, or do you play a lot of modern stuff? Like, what do you do?
I do a little bit of everything. I do the last game I just beat on Twitch was the new Kirby game, Forgotten Land, over on the Switch.
Nice.
Really like that. I've been playing a game on the PS3 called Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, which is like a JRPG using Studio Ghibli artwork. It's a beautiful game. But I've also played retro games. I used to do. I had this amazing upscaler thing called an OSSC that I didn't have it. I borrowed it from a friend, but it upscaled all my retro stuff into beautiful HD, and that's a conversation for another episode. That is a long, drawn out talking about visual fidelity of old games. Um, but I would play Sega games. I would play a bunch of my Sega Genesis games on every Saturday. So I played like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. I beat that on Switch,
Sweet.
or not Switch, on Twitch on stream. Um,
Okay.
so I've played like I forget. I actually played through all of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the original one. That was fun. But yeah, I do a little bit of everything. I do retro, modern, and I mean, I have it in my collection, so I stream it. Sometimes I do PC as well, so a little bit of everything.
Very
All
cool.
right. One last question before we go, because this is very important to me, because I'm a diehard fan of this series. Are you a Metal Gear Solid fan?
I have played the first one. I played a little bit of the second one, and that's about it. It's not. I loved the first one. I
Shoot you
really
the
enjoyed
third
it.
and fourth and the fifth, and you will be the third. I think is the best.
That's what a lot of people say. That's what a lot of my friends say too. I did an episode on both the first two. I've done an episode on the original, and I did an episode on Metal Gear Solid 2. But I had a guest on who did beat that game. fairly far into it, and I just lost interest in it. But I don't know. Kojima games are very hit or miss for me. I tried Death Stranding, and oh
Try that.
boy, did I hate that game.
I heard it sucked.
It's I should. It does not suck. I will say that.
Repetitive.
Yes, but that's more of my opinion. I feel like it depends on the personality. Like I love Minecraft. Minecraft's pretty repetitive. It's just mining through blocks for hours on it. I love it, but it just depends on the person. I will never say that Death Stranding is a bad game. I just really didn't like it. I did not enjoy it in the slightest. But I bought that game literally not because I like Kojima, but because this is a big, huge budget, essentially an independent game, and he's just doing whatever the heck he wants. And I want more AAA studios to take risks like he does, and so I wanted to support it with my dollar, even though I have no intention of enjoying it, because I wanted to see more games like it exist.
Fair enough. All right.
Well, cool. I think we'll kind of like wrap it up there.
So I'm down for anything.
Awesome.
Boys, you all have a good night.
Thanks, man.
Later.
Thanks, guys.
Josh, have a good one.
You too, man. Have a good night.
Thanks again.